I have been using Omnipod 5 for 3 months now, and I'm excited to tell you everything about my experience. Up until this point, for 3 years, I've been using open source systems, whether it be DIY Loop, Trio, IAPS, and I made the switch because the iPhone app for Omnipod 5 was in limited market release and I had access to it. So we're gonna get into the app, what that looks like, all of my experiences using Omnipod 5 so far, from just the form factor of wearing the device, but also getting into the algorithm and how well that's been working, what you can do on the system, and how it compares to open source systems. Welcome to the show. I'm Justin. I have type 1 diabetes, and on here I talk all things diabetes tech, news, and management with industry leaders, physicians, and people using the tech. But today is a solo episode. I do these once a month, and I'm very excited about this one because I've got so much to say about Omnipod 5 and some funny experiences using it so far, and some questions for you about your experience using it. I'm also curious to hear about people who are using other systems and how they compare to this one. So as you're watching, be sure to be liking the video if you're enjoying it, but also comment with your questions, your thoughts. I love hearing from all of you. Some housekeeping. We've got a newsletter that is officially up and running. We've got an article coming out every week, and the newsletter goes out every other week. You can sign up for that with the link in the show notes. We also have a Diabetech community Discord. There's a channel for just about every piece of technology. So if you're looking to engage with other people like you, go sign up with the link in the show notes. Keep in mind that anything you hear on this podcast or content on any of my pages is not medical advice. Always consult with a physician before making changes to your healthcare. I'm going to talk about open source apps today. These apps are not approved by the FDA or any regulatory authorities. You take full responsibility for building and using them, and you do so at your own risk. All right, let's get into the episode. Let's start off with just what it's like wearing Omnipod, the form factor, where I wear it. I freaking love this pump. It is so sleek, so small, and it just adheres to the body. It's approved in so many different areas to wear it, and I forget that it's on me. And I've never worn a tube pump, so I can't sit here and say it's better than a tube pump, but from my own experience, wearing Omnipod, I could just never imagine wearing a tube pump. That said, I will be trying some because I want to understand. I've found so many different areas to wear it, whether it be my arms. I have like 2 locations on each arm, 3 or 4 or 6 different areas on my belly / sides, my back. I even wear them on my upper butt, the side of my butt. I'd be curious to hear where your favorite areas of wearing the pump are in the comments. And I say the comments a lot because this video is not just audio, it's on YouTube, and many people are able to comment on there. I've been wearing the Omnipod 5 since October 2022, which was just 5 months after my type 1 diagnosis. And for the first 2 years of that, maybe a little longer, I was using open source apps. Specifically DIY Loop for a while and then Trio for a bit. And I had access to all of this customization. So switching to Omnipod 5 was going to be a bit of an adjustment. But I was excited to be starting using an iPhone so that I didn't have to carry around another PDM, which was a reason that I stuck with open source for so long. With Omnipod 5, it's a bit confusing, like the compatibility. They're still going through some transitional period, and I will say it has confused me or made my life harder as someone using the product. And let me explain why. Omnipod 5 now officially works with Dexcom G6 and G7, and you can use the PDM to connect those sensors to a pump. But you still need an Omnipod pump that works with both Dexcom G6 and G7, because the older models, in fact, the models I have on screen with me right now, these only work for Dexcom G6. You'll know they work with G7 also if it says it on the box. It also says it on the packaging. I got a lot of questions of whether or not it's better with G6 or better with G7. I have used both, and I have seen no difference in the accuracy or the insulin dosing. I've enjoyed both experiences. So for me, I'm happy with either of them. What I don't like about the Dexcom G6 is that you need sensors and you need a transmitter, which is more expensive and just more to think about, more dates to think about. I prefer G7 because it's all in one. I know this is going to last 10 and a half days and I'm set. But here's the kicker. The Omnipod 5 iPhone app that still hasn't quite released to all of you, and I've had, it is only going to work with Dexcom G6 at launch. Should be launching any day now. That's fine. I've enjoyed using it with Dexcom G6, but I don't want to be on the old software anymore, the old Dexcom software where I don't have all the alert settings. I don't want to be using the older technology, the more expensive technology because it needs more parts. I want to move to G7. I'm in a little bit of a predicament also because my Dexcom G6 transmitter is expiring in about 15 days. And I have so many Dexcom G7s that have been waiting for me to use. So I'm considering moving over to DIY Loop for a little bit. And there was a little moment where I had to do that during my Omnipod 5 wear because there was a bit of a snafu with the app. I do also have a bunch of Omnipod Dash pods that I think I will switch back to so I can use open source apps with Dexcom G7 so I can use those sensors. But yeah, I have a bunch of Omnipod 5 pods that will only work with G6 and no G6. So I'm figuring that out, and packing for my digital Nomad Fall has been very difficult with all of these moving parts, but I'm figuring it out. When it comes to controlling Omnipod 5, I have been mainly controlling it with the Omnipod app on the iPhone, and I freaking love it. It is so sleek. Right on the home screen, you have a nice big number with a trend arrow and a graph that you can tap on and go between 3 to 24 hours and see your trends. You can flip your phone to the side and then you see the graph over time, but you also see along the bottom all of the automations, when it is stopping insulin, when you're bolusing, when the maximum insulin has been dosed, things like that. I love seeing that right on my phone. It's so sleek to use. Much more sleek than the PDM experience. I also love dark mode. It sets the entire app to darker colors. Instead of a white background, it's black, and it's perfect for at night when I'm in bed and I just want to look at my app, dose, whatever. It is so much easier on the eyes. The app is amazing. You're going to love it. If you're on Dexcom G6, you can use it. If you're on G7, you're going to have to either wait or get back on G6 until it comes out with G7 support. My hope is that G7 support at least comes to the app by early next year. I feel like that's more than enough time for them to bring it out. And I really want everyone to have access to this because using the PDM is just not fun. And I had to do that for a bit, which I'll get into in a second. For the iPhone app, I was able to remap the Omnipod app to my action button on the iPhone 16 Pro I have. That action button exists on the iPhone 16s, both of them, and the iPhone 15 Pro. You can map that to open any app, and I have it as my Pancreas button. It's my Omnipod button. I tap it, it opens right up, and then Face ID needs to be used to unlock the iPhone app. It's amazing. I have a Instagram reel about how to set that up, and I'll throw that in the show notes so you can easily access that. The app is a similar experience to the PDM. The one new feature that's major is the favorite foods feature, where you can log different commonly eaten foods that you have. You can even put emojis and then log how many carbs those are. And then when you go to Bolus, you click custom foods and then you tap which ones you're eating and it adds them all up in the calculator. I will say that I have not used it at all since I first got the app. When I first got the app, I was excited about it, but since then, I haven't used it. Not to say that it's not a great feature, just for me, I'm able to just add things up quickly in my head. It could be great for kids and teens and people who aren't as good at carb counting and they're learning. I think that could be a great feature for them. Like I said, I needed to start using the PDM for a little bit, and that's because the iPhone app didn't work on my iPhone 16 when I first got it. So I got an iPhone 16 upgrade. I got a phone upgrade, but I really got a downgrade because the app didn't work with it. So I had to switch over to the PDM for a bit, and that was not a fun experience. I did not like using the PDM. I forgot it everywhere. So I understand what you're going through right now on Omnipod 5, having to use the PDM. I'm so ready for you to have access to the iPhone app. One thing I've had happen a few times is communication errors when I'm first activating pods. This happened both with my PDM and my phone. Has this happened to you where you're setting up the pod, you put in the insulin, and then it can't find the pod? I've had this happen quite a lot, to the point where I've had 3 or 4 pods be completely unable to connect. I've had to call customer support and get them replaced. It's always like a stressful situation when something like that happens, especially if you haven't packed enough supplies. If that's happened to you, let me know in the comments. I'm very curious. Besides that, everything has been pretty smooth. The iPhone app works flawlessly. I love it. Let's get into alerts and settings, because this is an area where I needed to get used to coming from open source apps. And let's start with alerts. There are so many beeps that I'm not used to, but some that I like that I didn't have before. So with Omnipod 5, if you are going low, there will be a beep, beep, beep from both your pump, and you'll also get that from like the PDM or the iPhone app. Sometimes that's a bit much though, because if I'm hearing it from the pump, I don't need to hear it from the PDM or the phone. So I wish there was a way to turn the sound off on the phone and the PDM. I don't think there is. Correct me if I'm wrong. Please correct me if I'm wrong. There's also beeps for when a pod is expiring. There's a beep both on the pump and your controlling device. One thing I've done is turn off confidence reminders and program reminders. One thing I haven't really done much on Omnipod 5, which is great, I haven't gone into manual mode much, except for when it comes to workouts. Another thing I've had to get used to is when there's a time change. So on open source, it kind of just saw that there was a time change, you tapped a button and it did its thing, it figured it out. With Omnipod 5, you have to go through a bunch of different screens in order to fix the time change. I think that this could be fixed by just tapping yes, confirming, and then Omnipod just doing its thing. I don't care what you're doing. I don't care that you're going into manual and then this and then that in order to change the time. I think it should just do it. But right now it has you go through like 5 different screens and confirmations when the time change happens. Is this the end of the world? No. But it's just a little extra time of me trying to just switch a time zone when I think it should just be one tap. A similar experience happens when you put on a temp basal. In order to go back to auto mode when you're in temp basal and manual mode, you have to shut off the temp basal, then switch from manual to auto mode. I think what you should be able to do is just switch to auto mode, and then the app knows to tell the pump to go to turn off temp, then go from manual to auto mode. I don't think that I need to act as like the controller to the controller. It's a little TMI. I think that's the best way to put it. Again, these are just like nitpicky things, but I'm pointing them out because I would love Omnipod to fix these. Another thing that was a big difference here was when it came to workouts. So there is an activity feature on Omnipod 5 that allows you to set your target range to 150 milligrams per deciliter. The lowest you can go with typical range is 110 milligrams per deciliter, which is where I have it set to. But for activity feature, it sets it to 150. That is to prevent you from going low during activity. But that's not going to keep you from going low if you are running or doing intense cardio, or at least for me, it's not. And my diabetes educator agrees. So she told me what I should do in this situation. I'm going to tell you what I've done. This isn't medical advice. It's just what I do in order to not go low. So what I do is I go into manual mode and I set a temp basal at 60% less insulin delivery for the basal for 2 hours. I turn that on 1 hour before I work out, and then that second hour happens while I'm working out. With open source apps, I had the ability to put on profiles or overrides that not only set different basals and targets, but also kept me in auto mode. To me, it was a little destabilizing to have to go into manual mode in order to work out, because workouts are when you want to be in auto mode, because workouts are when things change. It's the same when you're sleeping, right? You want to be in automated mode so that the pump is talking to the CGM and figuring it out. And it's unfortunate to me that with this system, I need to go into manual mode in order to not go low. And that said, I found that still, even doing this, I probably have some refinements. I found myself still going low about 20% of the time. Not bad. I think that this is also because I sometimes turned on the temp basal too late, but I think that there's still some refining. But that is to say that this is the main difference that I've had a hard time with switching to Omnipod 5, was the inability for myself to stay in automated mode and be able to cut down my basals myself, which open source apps give you. Today's episode is sponsored by T1D Exchange. You can directly make an impact on diabetes healthcare, treatments, and technology by participating in the T1D Exchange registry. It starts with a simple survey about your life with T1D, and it only takes about 15 minutes. After that, you'll have a personal portal with ongoing T1D study and survey opportunities. Plus, some of these studies even offer compensation. Signing up with the link in the show notes helps support my channel, and it allows me to continue putting out free content. You can sign up at t1dexchange.org/diabetic or click that link in today's show notes. Now let's get into the difference between Omnipod 5 and the open source apps I've used. I got a lot of questions from you asking, well, which one do you like better? Which one's better? And first off, let me just say that Omnipod 5 is an incredible system. First of all, it's an incredible pump that feels so comfortable to wear, but the algorithm is fantastic. It's done a great job for me. I have fantastic time and range, I think at least above 79% all the time, but it's not going to ever be the time and range you can get on open source. It's just not. But what's nice about it is it's FDA cleared. It's cleared by a government organization. You have a company that you can blame or call if something goes wrong. It's simple. You can't change a lot of settings, which is great for people who aren't technologically savvy, like I am and other people in the open source community are. This is a fantastic system for people who don't want all the bells and whistles. There's also something to be said that I noticed with Omnipod 5 is that I was thinking about diabetes less, I think, because there was less I could change or do on the system. Overall, when it came to workouts, not so much. I had to actually do more in this case. But I think I found with the open source apps is that I was going in and changing things every once in a while because I could. I don't know if I would necessarily prefer the simplicity, but there is something to be said about that time and happiness. This system doesn't give you a ton that you can customize, and there's something nice about that for someone who just wants to be a little more hands-off. I like to be hands-on. Besides workouts, the main thing that I needed to kind of recalibrate myself on when I switched these systems is what normal glucose levels kind of look like, where I want to be or where I expect myself to be. So as I said earlier, Omnipod 5 has a target range as low as 110 milligrams per deciliter, which I set mine at. Open source apps, DIY Loop, allows you to go as low as 87 milligrams per deciliter. And when I have it set, I put mine to 87 to 97. So my target range is well below Omnipod 5's. And because of that, I'm used to seeing my trend line hover in the 80s to 90s to 100, somewhere in there, especially when I'm not eating, when I'm sleeping. I get this beautiful line that just sticks well below where I'm seeing with Omnipod 5. Once I allowed myself to be okay with the 110 to 130 range, maybe 150, I was at ease. And I was like, okay, this is the new normal. And does that mean that's what it should be? No. And I think that Omnipod 5 has room to go, as well as all of the other companies, because I think Medtronic may be one of the lowest FDA cleared systems that's out now at 100 milligrams per deciliter. But there is also the Twists loop algorithm, which is based off of the DIY loop, that is going to be as low as 87 also. So I think that Omnipod probably also wants to catch up, and they are working on that, and I'll get into that in just a bit. So besides this new normal, I also needed to just get used to not having the customization options, especially like the overrides or profiles you see on DIY. I love the ability on DIY Loop to set a different basal and target range and just tap that on and have that be my running feature, or my high fat food feature where I have a slightly higher basal rate and lower target range to bring my glucose levels down. That flexibility I've become so accustomed to. So switching to Omnipod 5 and not having that, I was like, I found myself wanting that at times. Loop and Trio, they have widgets that, at least Loop has a widget where you can tap and bolus from, and it will take you right to that screen. They have live activities that show you your glucose readings and your trends on the home screen, on the lock screen. But these are things that Omnipod could do. Omnipod could come out with a widget that has the ability to bolus right from it. Of course, it will ask for Face ID when it opens, but it's really just a quick way of opening up the app to a specific page. There's no reason Omnipod couldn't do this. But I don't personally know how much work and money goes into needing to get that looked at. Does the FDA need to look at a widget that just takes you to a screen? To me, it sounds simple, but people's lives are at stake, right? Like if someone does this incorrectly, people could die. So I love that the widgets are in open source, and I'd love to see them with Omnipod 5. Same thing goes with the Apple Watch. With open source, you can bolus from your watch, and I would love to see that with Omnipod. If you're worried about security, you don't have to be, because if your watch is on your wrist and never left your wrist after putting in the code, then it will work. If you take off the watch and put it back on and you don't put in the code, you can't use it. So it is secure. You are the one, accessing the watch. These are things I hope to see with Omnipod 5, but currently they're just not things that you have with it. And one other thing is the algorithm. The algorithm for Omnipod 5 is said to not be as aggressive maybe as other ones out there. I've enjoyed it. I've found that it works well for me, but what works well for me may not work well for other people. Were there some moments where I felt like I was stuck high a little too long? Absolutely. But it didn't happen so often where I found myself resenting the system. I like this system. It's a system that I think many people will benefit from. And no, I'm not saying this because I work with Omnipod. I love it. I've worn it for years. And I also love that I'm able to, use whatever system I want with it. And I hope that continues to be the case for a very long time. One of the biggest advantages I found from switching from open source to Omnipod 5 was that with Omnipod 5, the continuous glucose monitor and pump talk together. You don't need the controller or phone in order for those to talk. Whereas with open source, you need the phone because the phone talks to the pump, the CGM talks to the phone, but the pump and the CGM don't talk to each other. So I found for the 2 years using open source that whenever I went outside by the pool when I was on vacation, I had to bring my phone. When I went on a walk along the water at the beach, I had to bring my phone. I always felt like I had to bring my phone with me because if I didn't have my phone with me, there would be no automation. Yes, I would get basal insulin, but it wouldn't automate. It wouldn't prevent a low. It wouldn't prevent a high. But with Omnipod 5, what's so incredible about it is that the two devices talk to each other. I could leave my phone behind. Of course, it's the controller right now, but which I still need. But I can leave the phone behind and just have them talk to each other and be set. And something I also noticed was that there were moments where my Dexcom wasn't connecting to my phone. My phone said on Dexcom that it wasn't, it was searching and I didn't have a number. But on the Omnipod app, I did have a number. So those were still talking, and that's a huge advantage. So that is probably, I think, one of the coolest things I found switching from one to the other, this sense of freedom I got from just wearing those two devices. Now, what would give me even more freedom was that if there were an Apple Watch app that allowed me to bolus from for Omnipod. There you go. You've got direct to watch with Dexcom, and then you've got the Omnipod app on your watch. You can just bolus, and then no phone needed. Is that possible? I have no freaking idea. Omnipod, if you're listening, please make it happen. So with all of that said, I am a bit of a perfectionist or a techie, or I like to be able to noodle with my basals and workout settings. So I may consider going back to DIY so that I can do that. I actually wound up accidentally needing to go back to DIY Loop because of the app not working on my new iPhone 16 and me not wanting to carry the PDM, and I had dash pods. So I went on Loop, had my dash pods connected to the G7, and I was like, wow, this is great. I forgot how much I liked this app. And I also refined my settings a bit from the last time I was on it. And so much has happened with Loop, with new experimental algorithms. There's a glucose-based partial application algorithm and an integral retrospective correction. I cannot fully tell you what these do. I'm still learning. But what I can tell you is these allow the algorithm to be more aggressive than other systems out there like Omnipod 5. So open source may be more for someone like me who loves to tinker, but Omnipod 5 is just so perfect for people who aren't like that, which is majority of the people. I actually had an interview with John Fawcett. He's the creator of Sugar Pixel, that little sign that shows your glucose readings that's in most of my videos. I interviewed him about Loop and Omnipod 5 and how they differ and how you can take advantage of them to get the best out of both of them. And what surprised me in that was he leaned toward Omnipod 5 over Loop and had some really convincing reasons and some great tips for how to best use Omnipod 5. I actually listened to it a couple times before getting on Omnipod 5. So you should take a listen to that. I'll throw that in the show notes so you can hear that. Another question I got from a lot of you was whether or not the iPhone app is coming to other areas outside the US, and I don't know the answer to that. But what I can say is that Insulet hasn't announced anything about it releasing anywhere else, which I don't think is the best sign. I've asked and I haven't gotten any response or any actual answer. So for now, there are no other announced places for it. I do hope everyone can get it. It seems like right now Insulet's really just trying to get Omnipod 5 and even Dash out to more locations. And then once they do that, maybe they'll have more time for it. Also, there's no official timeline for G7 with the app, but I really hope that comes soon because it would make many of our lives easier. I kind of wanted to just spend a little time at the end about like the future of Omnipod 5 and kind of where I see it going and what we know is happening. So G7 compatibility, hopefully next year, early next year. The Libre 2 Plus has been announced as a continuous glucose monitor that will be supported, that they are working on support for. It already has support in the UK. It's on the website. People are able to use that. I also want to see support for Libre 3 Plus. I hope that maybe they could even skip to the Libre 3 Plus because that is a much smaller sensor. It's the size of 2 stacked pennies. It's more accurate. And I think we should be trying to move, to the newer technology. But hey, if they can do Libre 2 Plus, giving people options is fantastic. Now, the big news of the future of Omnipod 5 is the evolution algorithm. This is an advanced algorithm that they are working on that would be the next step in the algorithm. And what they're hoping for with this is for a fully closed loop system where no one needs to bolus for meals. So they've had some promising results, and I'm going to give you some of that right now. So when it came to some people with type 1 diabetes who used this system, they had them use the current system and not bolus, and people with type 1 were about 37% in range. With the new updated algorithm, that went up to 57% time in range without bolusing. That's a huge jump. Are we there yet? No, because I think we should get a minimum of 70%? That's the ADA standard. Now with type 2s, they found that people went from 52% time in range to 65% time in range, not bolusing on this newer algorithm. Give this video a like if you want a whole video dedicated to the new algorithm and what I want to see from it. But the future is bright with this device. The app is coming out. The G7 support hopefully is coming out soon after. And this evolution algorithm just seems so freaking cool. And I'm excited to see not just Omnipod, but all the other companies who are also working on fully closed loop systems, even open source people. There's so many big things coming. The future is bright. I'm very excited. Also, what's next for me? So I did Omnipod 5. I was on open source before. The next thing I want to do is I want to try out Tandem's Mobi. I know that there is a 90-day free trial and I can do it. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to try it out for 90 days. I'm going to document it. I'm going to compare it to all the systems I've used, because my goal is to truly use all of these systems so that I can better explain them to you, speak the language that you speak from your pump. I think that would be fantastic. So I'm so excited for that next adventure. I'll let you know when that's happening. If you've got any questions on Omnipod 5 DIY, let us know in the comments. If I don't answer it, someone else will. Y'all have conversations, I see them. But if you want direct access to my inbox, you need your question to be answered, then you should follow me on Patreon. It supports the channel when you sign up for a subscription over there, and you also get other content that doesn't release anywhere else. It's behind the scenes content, interviews and clips that just never made the cut. Those will be on Patreon, and I've got some good stuff coming out over there. And our next newsletter actually has a giveaway for the Sweet Dreams app. So you're gonna wanna sign up to be part of that. So you can sign up with the link in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. I'm Justin, and I'll see you next week.